Now, The Hunt Palmer Show.
Yes! I feel like I've been waiting for this my entire life.
You're listening to The Hunt Palmer Show on 104.5 ESPN Baton Rouge.
Jolly good fun. Jolly good.
Locking down the middle of the day.
America's favorite daytime fun show.
Live from the Mercedes-Benz of Baton Rouge studio. This is Hunt Palmer.
Hour 2, Monday edition of the Hunt Palmer Show, presented by Gulf Coast Office Products. Denton Day, 30 minutes from right now on the national scene inside college football. We'll talk a little Saints coming up here as they get ready for a home game with the Rams coming up on Sunday afternoon. Short work week for us here on 104.5 ESPN Baton Rouge. Just Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday we'll be out for Thanksgiving on Thursday, and we will also be out on Friday, except for Live at Lunch. They will do their show from Rufino's as scheduled normally, but the rest of us will be out. I'm going to be on the golf course. I'm very much looking forward to that. All right, we entered the week in SEC Pick'ems straight up 500, right at 500, and we knew we had to close strong if we were going to get it to the house over 500 for the year. Well, Beck, it doesn't sound like we did that on Saturday, did we?
Nope, we did not.
3-6, is that what I'm reading?
Yes, that is correct. 3-6.
We did not get home with Ole Miss minus 12.5. They lost. We did not get home with Georgia minus 42. That was really close. We did not get home with with Wofford minus 42.5. South Carolina scored with how much time on the clock?
Yeah, not much.
God, terrible. Don't cover that,
8 seconds.
Beamer. 8 seconds. We're scoring a touchdown to push that over the number. The Hogs could not cover 22. They won by 21. I also had Mississippi State plus the 8. They got destroyed by Missouri. I had Bama minus 13.5. They lost by 100. So that is 6 losses. I did cover with Auburn plus 2.5. They beat Texas A&M. I did cover with Kentucky plus 20. And I did cover with the Vols laying 40.5 after a pretty crummy start to the game against UTEP. But they put the pedal to the metal. And I did say on Friday I didn't think UTEP would score. They did not score any points. So I should get double points for that. Yeah. I don't believe you're going to do that for me. But 3-6, not going to get it done. Let's talk about the games, though, because I thought that it was some fascinating stuff. Credit Florida. Absolute credit to Florida. Held this thing together. The players played hard. The fans were into it against LSU and Ole Miss, and they delivered with a couple of really nice home wins that have kind of steadied things under Billy Napier in Gainesville. I thought that one of the big factors in this game was Lane Kiffin's aversion to kicking field goals. He has been like this his entire coaching career, so this is not new news. And the way that he is operating has gotten him to heights that Ole Miss really hasn't seen in previous administrations. But this team could have allowed him to coach differently. This is the best defense he's ever had. They're really good up front. They're the best run defense in the league. They lead the country in sacks. Like, they're good on defense. And that means 3 points can really be a big deal. When he was getting into these big shootouts because his offense was awesome, the defense stunk, yeah, go for it on 4th down all you want. But when you've got a defense that's capable of shoving Georgia into a locker last week and holding them to 10 points, you can kick some field goals. And he wouldn't do it. He turned away 2 short field goals to snap it to his defensive tackle who was bouncing the ball outside and getting stopped. And it cost him, because if you kick those 2 field goals and ifs and buts and all that kind of stuff and the butterfly effect, I get it all. But that's 6 points, and all of a sudden you don't have to go down and get a touchdown at the end. A field goal may help you there. And it's too late now because they've got 3 losses and they're not getting at large and they're not going to Atlanta, so their chances of getting to the college football playoff are essentially cooked. But I just don't understand why he couldn't just tweak that a little bit and suggest, hey, we've got a good defense. We need to lean on that. Because the analytics that he's looking at are talking about the probability of converting the 4th down. They don't take into effect how good your defense is. And I think he needs to weigh that sometimes, and he didn't, and it cost him. And DJ Lagway made some incredible plays early in that game, some highlight reel throws, and they stayed in that game for the entirety of it, and they took it to Ole Miss and won that football game 24-17, and they deserved it. I think that Lane Kiffin overthought this a little bit, and going for those 4th downs really, really hurt. Of course, he did it in Baton Rouge as well, and they got stopped early in the game. So Big loss for Ole Miss. Maybe the most impactful loss for Ole Miss since 2003. I think that's probably fair to say. I was listening to Locked On Ole Miss, which called it the biggest choke job in the history of the school. That's a strong statement, but it is what it is. That's a tough loss for the Ole Miss Rebels. Speaking of losses, Alabama came up with another one. I've got a feeling we're about 54 minutes away from hearing about that on After Further Review. But that's just a dreadful performance by Alabama. To score 3 points against Oklahoma is atrocious. And again, this goes back to my ranting and raving 3 weeks ago about Jalen Milroe's performance in Tiger Stadium. He didn't do that to anyone else. And that includes Oklahoma, where Jalen Milroe ran the ball 15 times for 7 yards. Oh, by the way, he threw it 26 times. He completed 11 of them, and he threw 3 picks. Against LSU, he's sitting back there on third downs in the rain, completing halfback option passes and carving LSU up. What did LSU do to unlock that guy for 2 years? We talked about it the week prior. He played old Missouri. He was inaccurate, looked uncomfortable. Shows up against LSU. Looks like he's destined for New York for the Heisman. He was awful on Saturday. Absolutely awful. Again, the statistics, 11 of 26, 3 interceptions, 15 carries for 7 yards. Alabama lost a game to Oklahoma in which the Sooners threw for 68 yards. Jackson Arnold threw for 68 yards. He ran the ball 25 times. It was basically like a 1A high school football team that was snapping it to their athlete every time and just letting him run. And Alabama just couldn't muster anything on offense to counter it. Oklahoma got the lead, and they just said, all right, we're just going to sit on this thing. And they did. And Alabama never found anything on offense. And Alabama fans are now realizing, I think, if they hadn't previously, that they now live in the world with everybody else. They live in the world with everybody else. They can get bad losses. They can lose to bad teams, bad weeks, bad seasons. They're about to find out that they actually play bowl games outside of the playoff. It's going to be new territory for the Crimson Tide fans. It's your birthright to just be awesome every year has very little to do with that Crimson A. It has almost everything to do with the former coach. And now he's gone. So welcome to the party with the rest of us. We have to sweat it out most Saturdays. We have some real disappointing Sunday mornings. You hadn't dealt with that in 20 years. Well, here it comes. Because Kalen DeBoer is a good football coach, but he's not the greatest football coach in the history of college football. And they're not just going to roll out of bed and beat everybody by 40 anymore. And they certainly didn't on Saturday. They looked awful in that game against Oklahoma. One more SEC game of note that I wanted to briefly mention. Of course, the highlights there were 2 playoff hopefuls in Alabama and Ole Miss losing and essentially knocking themselves out. The other was Texas A&M in that same vein. And I thought A&M was going to win that football game the second they scored their second touchdown to cut it to 7 because they fell behind 21-0. And when they got it to 21-14, I went, okay, Auburn's toast, and that A&M's just going to come back and win the game. And credit the Aggies for having the resilience to come back and do that. I thought Hugh Freeze made a terrible decision not to go for 2 in the second overtime when he had opportunity to win the game with a 2-point conversion. I thought it was foolish to go ahead and kick it again. Then you get into that crazy just 2-point play situation, and which is what they ended up getting into. And Auburn, quite frankly, needed an A&M guy to flat drop the football. I mean, Myers is 3 in next month. He probably catches that one. I mean, right in the hands, right off the face mask of Amari Daniels, and he can't make the catch on Philly special. But I thought Hugh Freeze should have tried to end it earlier, and he didn't quite get it done. So Texas A&M loses, but really, did it even matter? Did that loss even matter? Because they are going to the SEC championship game if they beat Texas. And I don't believe if they would have lost the SEC championship game at 10-2, meaning they beat Auburn and beat Texas to get into the SEC championship game and lose that game, I don't think they were going to get in the college football playoff. So really, that loss for A&M isn't all that consequential unless there's a scenario that I'm just not considering. They just got everything on their racket now with Texas. The thing that they don't have is momentum because they've lost their last 2 games of consequence to South Carolina and now to Auburn. They had a non-conference game and a bye week sandwiched in there, but a loss that looked like it was debilitating, and then you step back and reassess the situation and realize that, oh, well, it doesn't really matter because as long as they beat Texas, they're going anyway, and they had to win the SEC championship game to get into the college football playoff anyway. So that loss, I don't believe, was all that consequential. Marcel Reed played pretty good in this game. He did have the interception, but ran it for 66 yards, threw it for 297. I thought it was a pretty gutty effort by A&M to come back and equalize things, but Auburn in the end outlasted them because A&M didn't catch the football in the overtime. So those are the big impactful moments from the SEC over the weekend. We'll talk a little bit more about all that with Denton Day coming up in a few minutes, about 15 from right now. Come back and talk about the Saints. Should they go get a quarterback that was recently released? I'll talk about it next.
The Hunt Palmer Show.
Got to make LeBear's Baton Rouge your game day headquarters this season. Getting down to the end of it in college football. If you want to watch all the action on Saturday, no better spot than ESPN Bet inside LeBear's. They got great food, fantastic drink specials, an incredible game watching experience, a ton of games on at one time. You can gamble on them at the sportsbook window right behind you. There's a blackjack table there as well. Great group seating as well as some individual spots. All of it is fantastic over at ESPN Bet inside LeBear's. And you got 1 week to go in the Cover 5 contest, and I've got great news for you. You are probably beating me in the Cover 5 contest, even if you're not even competing, because I'm now in the negative because I've been that bad over the last few weeks. But you can download one more week here, LABRSEC24, and play for the final week, and you can win weekly prizes. If you're not a member, get the Pin Play app today. LeBear's Baton Rouge, your live sports headquarters. Must be 21 years or older. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-589-9966 for help.
You're listening to The Hunt Palmer Show, brought to you by Gulf Coast Office Products.
Monday show is brought to you by Gulf Coast Office Products, GCOPnet.com, GCOPnet.com. For all your printing, scanning, copying needs, Gulf Coast Office Products, the #1 office products distributor, according to the Baton Rouge Business Report. Reach out to our guy, Trey Beal, at GCOPnet.com and see what he can do for you. They've got offices throughout the state. They've got enough resources to handle any issue that you've got here in South Louisiana and up into the 318 as well. Fantastic people, fantastic company over there at Gulf Coast Office Products. I know if you're a business, you've got a printer, copier, scanner somewhere. And if you don't know why you have the one that you have, you might want to check with them and make sure that you've got exactly what you need to best meet your needs. It's Gulf Coast Office Products, GCOPnet.com here in Baton Rouge. All right. There's a new odds out for Daniel Jones and where his next landing place is going to be over there at Bet Online. And the Saints are at 25-1. They're on the list here. And I looked at that, and it's not a terrible thought because the Saints have brought in former starters to be backups over the years. It started obviously with Jameis Winston was here, Teddy Bridgewater was here as well. Brought in Andy Dalton. They've had some guys that have come in that have been starters elsewhere that are now coming off that huge contract and are career backups at that point. And it feels like that's Daniel Jones' destiny. I don't think there is anybody that's really rushing to make him the face of their franchise at this point. That's fair to say. And the Saints certainly aren't in that position right now, although we don't know exactly what Derek Carr's future holds. But is it worth bringing him in as a potential backup and a low risk guy to bring in, very similar to Jameis and Teddy Bridgewater? I just think no. I right now, as I look at the Saints, I think that they've probably got a quality NFL backup on their roster. I don't think they've got a future starter between Spencer Rattler and Jay Kaner. I think that's ambitious. But I think there's a realistic chance that one of those two guys is a very solid backup quarterback. And the Saints have needed backup quarterbacks over the years. You're talking about a franchise that had Drew Brees get injured a little bit later in his career. We've seen, obviously, Derek Carr go down both years. He's been the starter here. Like, the backup quarterback is somebody that you need at times to come in, be functional, and help you stay afloat. The Saints clearly did not stay afloat this year, so that would be one strike against these two guys as potential backup quarterbacks, but I think they have a chance. I don't think that there's enough potential upside with Daniel Jones to bring him in to hope on a wishing star that he becomes, hey, the next starter after Derek Carr moves forward. You have a new coach coming in January or February, and that coach is very likely going to immediately begin assessing the quarterback situation and trying to find out who he wants to align himself with. Maybe it's Derek Carr. Maybe it's somebody in the draft. Maybe the Saints think they can throw something up in free agency for somebody who's toward the back end of their career that might be available in the way that Kirk Cousins became available, in the way that Phillip Rivers locked on someone. Like, just name your potential source. The new coach is probably going to try to address quarterback in some capacity because Derek Carr is probably only going to be the quarterback one more year, if I had to guess. I just don't think Daniel Jones is the answer to any of these questions. I don't think he's a significant upgrade over Rattler or Haener. I don't think he is a likely budding starter. I don't think he really brings much of anything. Daniel Jones is what he is because some organization decided to take him early in the first round. You've seen some of these draft takes. I mean, Todd McShay's was pretty famous on Twitter saying, I don't know what the Giants are seeing here. Everything that I see on tape suggests he's a backup quarterback in this league. They took him in the top 10 picks. And so it's not a guy that I think a lot of teams in the league are clamoring to bring in to their organization. He's made a ton of money. The Giants are going to foot the vast majority of that. But to me, there's not really an upside here with the Saints. If they did not have a backup quarterback, I would maybe suggest that that's a guy that you could bring in on the cheap. But they've got a couple of guys that they've invested some time and resources into, and I think are plenty good enough to make things happen. So I don't see a viable path for Daniel Jones coming to New Orleans. I don't think it makes a whole lot of sense. So essentially what I'm telling you here is 25-1 odds sounds like a pretty good return. I wouldn't place that wager down at betonline.ag. But you can read about it right now at louisianasports.net. Our guy Ross Jackson did a great job of kind of breaking down what he thought about the situation as it revolved around the Saints. So you can check that out over at louisianasports.net right now. I have had a chance a little bit earlier to read an article on The Athletic. I got through about 90% of it, so there's still some that I've got to get through, but I'm still just going to briefly mention it because it's going to get a lot of run in LSU fan circles. If you want to read it, it's on The Athletic. Ralph Russo just started with The Athletic a couple of weeks ago, and he's obviously been working on this story about Brian Kelly for a while, talking about the fit in Baton Rouge and the culture and the program, and he got a few people connected to the program to speak in terms of anonymity. He also got Charles Turner, former center, on the record, saying that Brian Kelly did not have a great personal relationship with Charles Turner. They didn't speak a lot. You had to book an appointment to talk to Brian Kelly instead of the open door policy that Ogeron had. There are a lot of things that Brian Kelly has implemented that worked at Notre Dame that some people feel aren't working in Baton Rouge. And I read through the story, and I just didn't see a lot of substance to what was being suggested. Basically, the framework of this story that Ralph Russo put together was like, yeah, Brian Kelly's lost 4 games in year 3, and he didn't usually do that at Notre Dame, and a lot of people kind of don't think it's working, and I got some people to say that maybe it's not the best. There's nothing like that I read, and I haven't gotten to the very end of it, that's like a pointed example of something that's an issue. It's a lot of cloudy, things are not super awesome writing. And I don't think it's like a hit piece. I don't think it's poorly written. I think it's just lacking a punch of some sort. And for whatever reason, Brian Kelly is a bit of a lightning rod nationally. Just a lot of people don't care for Brian Kelly. I didn't like Brian Kelly when he was the head coach at Notre Dame because I don't really like Notre Dame. I don't like the fact that Notre Dame plays by a different set of rules from everybody and that they don't have to be in a conference and they think they're the whole aura of Notre Dame just kind of turns me off. And that's why I didn't like Brian Kelly, because he was their coach. But I don't find him to be overly abrasive. I think he treated the local media here in Baton Rouge very well. I think some of his dad jokes aren't that funny, and I get that he does yell at some players on the sideline, but so does just about everybody. Nick Saban yelled a lot on the sideline. I'm a little bit perplexed at the disdain for Brian Kelly nationally, and it feels like that's what this column is rooted in. I got the Will Wade thing. I understand. He's cocky. He's arrogant. He's on the recording. I get it. People didn't like Will Wade. That makes a ton of sense. I'm not as crystal on the Brian Kelly disdain and why that follows him around, but it felt like that this story was written because of that. Am I far off on this, Beck? I know that you read some of it. I didn't find it to be something that had a central issue that it was drilling home on. It was basically just kind of things are kind of iffy. Like, that was what I read.
Yeah, I think that the article is trying to I don't know that it's trying to push a narrative, but I do think that it is clearly, pushing the main point of the article is just to say that there's question marks at LSU.
Yeah. Which they're 8-4 if they win the game on Saturday. I don't think there's any issue. I mean, anybody debating that,
right? So there's question marks at almost every college football program. You could probably write that article about Alabama right now.
Well, I saw. I mean, one of the pieces to this, and I did a segment on this a couple of weeks ago, so it's not as if I didn't bring it up either. But like, he talks about the fact that the class from 2 years ago, a lot of guys have transferred out.
Yeah.
Newsflash.
It happens
everyone's transferring all over the place. So I don't think that's not some kind of like crazy thing. My point when I actually referenced the class was talking about how few of those guys are stars at this point.
Yeah.
He was just saying, well, they've had like 11 guys transfer. Like, well, no joke. Like, everybody's got 11 guys that are transferring. I don't think that's news to anybody moving forward. So again, I'm going to give this another read after the show. It's always a little bit dangerous to try to read something in a break and then comment on it publicly. But I felt like I got enough of it to kind of chat about it briefly, and I think there are a lot of people that haven't read it yet and that will read it in the coming hours and maybe the coming days. Again, there are some times where I read something and I go, that's poor work, but I don't think Ralph Russo did a bad job here. He talked to 8 people. He got Charles Turner on the record. He brought up some actual instances with the discussion with Chris Hilton on the sideline at Florida. He talked about the recruiting class and some guys leaving. Talked about Mike Denbrock and Joe Sloan and why the offense. There is enough meat on the bone that you can see kind of where he's going. But I was looking for something to punch a little harder than just, they've lost 4 games in year 3. That's not super awesome. And I think that everyone is aware around here that there have been some mistakes made. That first staff had some misses, there's no doubt. But I also think it's reasonable to suggest that he's patched a lot of those holes with some really quality coaches. And this is where I little bit zag when everyone seems to be zigging. There is a lot of noise in this town, in this fan base, on the internet about the offensive coordinator and the quarterback. And I think it's a little bit too pronounced. I think that LSU did some bad things offensively in those 3 games. But I also think that the LSU offense is a long way away from broken. And I think the quarterback is a long way away from bad. I was disgusted. Now, I talked about this a lot as well. You can't trust 20,000 drunk kids to make really good decisions. But the Boo Birds that came out during starting lineups on Saturday for the quarterback really rubbed me the wrong way. But I just don't really get it. Jared Nussmeyer's not going to win the Heisman this year, but he's had a pretty good season.
Yeah.
I mean, he was great on Saturday. He completed 76%, didn't turn it over, got LSU into the right run plays, according to Brian Kelly. I thought he was great in crunch time of the Ole Miss game to will LSU to a victory. I thought he was great for the most part at leading LSU back against South Carolina, against a really good defense. We can always talk about how the South Carolina lost its starting quarterback. Their defense was still out there in that game, and LSU scored 38. So I think that there's some noise around the offensive coordinator and quarterback that's probably too pronounced for me. But Russo talked about that in the story as well. Look, there's no question that Brian Kelly is going to be graded on the entirety of his work in Baton Rouge. And right now, it's not good enough. You wasted a just phenomenal offense. I hate the word generational. A phenomenal offense because you had a terrible defense last year because you hired a bad staff. And this year, you're going to lose 4 or 5 games, and that's bad. But I don't think that is closing the book on the Brian Kelly era. Billy Napier's had a heck of a worse run than Brian Kelly has, and everybody thinks they're on the fast track success now after the last 2 weeks. So, I don't know. I thought the article would have a little bit bigger punch than it did. I'll let you folks that read it be the judge of that in the coming hours and days. But yeah, they got to win some more games. No question about that. All right, let's come back with Denton Day, SiriusXM's College Football Overtime. That's next.
The Hunt Palmer Show.
Genesis of Baton Rouge. Every car on the lot at Genesis of Baton Rouge is online at genesisofbatonrouge.com. Man, I got a chance to get behind the wheel of a Genesis a couple of weeks ago when I was at the dealership. It is such a first-class vehicle. They're so sleek. They are so stylish. They are so safe. Look great. Drive exceptionally well. If you haven't test-driven a Genesis or been inside a Genesis, I would just highly recommend you put it on the list the next time you're in the market for a new vehicle. You're probably going to be on Airline Highway anyway. Stop in at Airline in Pico across from Women's Hospital and drive a Genesis. It is truly a luxury vehicle. And when I say luxury, I don't want you to immediately go, well, I can't afford that. Just go by and try. The Genesis model is a luxury brand at a reasonable price. And it's going to be incredibly safe and stylish as well. It's Genesis of Baton Rouge. Every single new purchase, 10-year, 100,000-mile warranty. 10 years, 100,000 miles on the warranty at Genesis of Baton Rouge. genesisofbatonrouge.com.
This is the Hunt Palmer Show, brought to you by Gulf Coast Office Products.
Drama in the Bahamas for the LSU women's basketball team. It's about 15 hours after the LSU men at the Greenbrier won a triple overtime game. The ladies, with some drama of their own, they get out alive. They beat Washington at the buzzer. Kaylin Gilbert makes a layup to give LSU a 1-point win at the Horn, 68-67. The Tigers fell behind by 13 at the end of the first quarter, clawed their way back and beat Washington by 1 in the Bahamas. So their first real test of the season, and it was ugly for a while there, but they passed it. LSU women moved to 6-0. They are ranked 7th in the country. All right, let's talk some college football. Denton Day, SiriusXM College Football Overtime, with us every single Monday. Joins us now on the Jim's Firearms Hotline. Denton, how we doing?
I'm good, man. What a weekend for the SEC. How about that?
Let's start there, I guess. We'll talk Indiana, Ohio State, sure, but let's start in the SEC. What was the most impactful result that you saw in the Southeastern Conference? There are probably 3 to choose from.
It had to be Alabama getting thumped the way that they did. You know, you can make an argument in certain games for losing, right? Especially in the SEC. Like, that's the whole point of the argument that had been made this week when everyone was debating Indiana versus the teams in the SEC, that everybody in that conference is really good, or, well, everyone other than like Kentucky and Mississippi State.
Yes.
But the argument is that everyone in that conference is good, but then to put up 3 points and not find the end zone once against Oklahoma. And I like Brett Venables' defense. I think he's done a really good job on that side of the football at Oklahoma this year, but you can't get into the end zone once. So that was a very, very bad loss as far as I'm concerned. Not the worst that we've seen this season by any stretch, but given the context and given that you'd already lost 2 games and all of the conversation, which isn't Alabama's fault by any stretch, but all the conversation this week about how much better that conference is, to then go and lose to Oklahoma like that, that one was rough.
It's just inexplicable to me that they could play that poorly. I mean, the Jalen Milroe that I watched with my own eyes inside Tiger Stadium, just 3 weeks later looking like that is hard to imagine. He ran for like 7 yards and threw 3 interceptions.
I mean, he's more hot and cold than Katy Perry in like 2011 or whatever that song came out. I mean, he's so all over the place because you're right. You see that game against LSU and you're like, this is the guy that we thought was going to be in contention for the Heisman. And then just a couple of weeks later, he can't do literally anything. I mean, he was like 11 of 26. I don't even know if he threw for 100 yards. Like, it was awful what he was doing. They just could not get anything going offensively. And we know they have talent. I I was so perplexed. I was laughing because watching Alabama lose is still funny to me, but I was so perplexed with what I was seeing because it was such a difference from what we'd seen over the past couple weeks.
What do you think of Kalen DeBoer? I mean, obviously, I don't think things are real peachy in Tuscaloosa at this point, but do you feel really good about his ability to lead that program?
Yeah, I still feel good about him. I mean, you kind of understood that at some point there was going to be a punch in the mouth. I mean, you're taking over for Nick Saban, and then like half of the roster jumps into the portal. And you keep a lot of those guys or some of those guys, but you lose so much of that roster. I think if you give him some time, I think he's going to be all right. I actually would argue that they might be a little bit ahead of schedule because they could still find their way into the college football playoff. It's not out of the realm of possibility. Their job just got their life got a lot more difficult in that process based on this loss.
Lane Kiffin, this is probably the most talented Ole Miss team in 5 decades, and they lose their third game. You're talking about losses to a Florida team that's around 500 and a bad Kentucky team sandwiched around beating Georgia. I mean, it's just a bizarre season. What do you make of it?
This is so Lane Kiffin. I mean, you lose that game to Kentucky, and then they lose in wild fashion to LSU, but they beat Georgia, and all of a sudden you're like, all right, playoff back on the board, and then he's having this conversation, hey, guys, we need to make sure everybody tries. We don't want anybody to avoid the SEC championship game when we know he's trying to avoid it because he doesn't want that third loss. And then not only do they go out and lose, but they go out and lose to a team that he had been rumored to take the job of if Billy Napier got fired. I was like, you got to be kidding. This is so, like, it's storybook in the weird, it's like a storybook ending if you're on acid. Like, it's so all over the place. I kind of felt bad for Jackson Dart, kind of. You know, he throws that interception that wasn't an interception, but then you see him get emotional, and then it's ruled not an interception. Like, wait a second, all right, here Jackson Dart comes with redemption, and then he throws a worse interception. I mean, he was not good in the fourth quarter. I mean, this is like the Lane Kiffin experience, though. That's what it's been for Ole Miss.
My take on it was, and look, Lane is stubborn and he's set in his ways, but he learned from Nick Saban, who very much was flexible towards the end of his career in going with the tempo and embracing the transfer portal. And like he changed. And Lane Kiffin, he believes so firmly in going for these fourth downs. But he had a great defense, and he didn't want to trust them. He just wanted to go score. And I feel like it hurt him on Saturday not getting points in the red zone when he's trying to snap it to Pegues. Do you think he'll ever back off of that if he's got a defense that's this good again?
I mean, I sure hope so, because I'm with you. Like, sooner or later, these coaches, because we've seen such a rise, the amount of coaches that play that aggressive style of we're going to go for it on fourth down, we're going to go for twos, even if it's like a 4th and 6, we're going to go for it. I mean, Dan Lanning lost 2 games to Washington doing that last year. He kind of has learned for it, although they did take a punt 2 weeks ago, and you're like, what is he doing? But these coaches need to kind of understand that there is some sort of pride in doing it at the right time, not every time. And like, the Madden approach, I call it the Madden approach. I've never punted in Madden in my life. What am I, a dork? Like, I'm going for it on fourth down, but that's a video game. Like, you shouldn't be doing that on Saturday in Gainesville. You're right, because you got a defense. Trust your defense.
Yeah. Get some points. He had 2 chances to kick field goals and didn't want to do it. All right, let's go to the Big Ten. What do you make of Indiana's situation now? Did they do enough to stay in? Did all the help they got help? I mean, where are they?
The answer to that at 3 was no. And then the answer to that after everyone in the SEC lost was yes, because of it. Like, you have to fill the 12 teams. And at that point, like, if I'm a 3-loss SEC team, you're either looking at a 1-loss Indiana team, or you're looking at a 2-loss ACC team, because either SMU or Miami is going to end up with 2 losses. But tomorrow, both those teams are likely going to be in the top 12. So now I guess the conversation, if you're a fan of the SEC, is now directed towards them on trying to prove that we as a conference are better than the ACC. I think Indiana's still going to get in. I don't think they looked particularly great, but we kind of knew this was going to happen, right? Like, the idea of 12 teams has been fun because some of these games during the late stretch of the season that maybe wouldn't have meant something, like, for example, number 9 Ole Miss versus unranked Florida, did have a lot of meaning to it, but we knew that, like, the 11th seed is not going to win. There's maybe 4 teams. I think it's probably 3 teams that can win a national championship. So, like, we're getting to the point where we're just arguing with teams that we know are more likely than not going to get beat up pretty bad in the first round.
Yeah, to that point, and how do you think, we know how Indiana matches up with Ohio State, not very well, but how does Indiana match up, in your opinion, with Tennessee or Ole Miss or Penn State or Miami or Clemson?
Tennessee, I would say they match up maybe better than people expect. I'm kind of off on that offense. I just don't think Nico I's been all that impressive. Defensively, they've been okay, but I'm not over the moon with Tennessee the way that other people seem to be. Some of those other teams, I mean, Miami, I don't think they stand a chance. Miami has another gear. As long as Mario Cristobal doesn't get in his own way, that's a team that does have the potential, I think, to win a championship. I mean, that is their only flaw, or at least their big, massive flaw right now, is that their coach is kind of a goof sometimes on the sideline. They have their quarterback.
Did we lose Denton there?
Oh, sorry. I thought you were saying something.
No,
that's on me.
You're good. Yeah, I mean, they have a quarterback that's really good.
Yeah, they have a quarterback. The thing with Indiana is they're a great story and they're a great team in terms of like the way that their locker room is situated. Like they love each other, and that's great. But eventually, you have to be better than the teams that have a lot of talent. And they are not built right now to where they are a top talented team in the nation. So once you get to these games where everybody has talent, you're going to be in a little bit of trouble.
What do you think about South Carolina and Clemson coming up at 11 o'clock on Saturday? Clemson's at home. They're a 2.5-point favorite, but South Carolina's playing really as well as anybody in the SEC, quite frankly.
I mean, this has so much juice. When was the last time that Clemson, South Carolina was the biggest game on rivalry weekend? Because I think it's going to be. You know, Ohio State, Michigan, obviously that rivalry goes deep, but Michigan's not very good. If Ohio State doesn't beat them by 14 or more, it's going to be a disaster, I would think, for Ryan Day. Like, they should go out there and smoke them. Auburn, Alabama might be interesting because if Auburn gives them another loss, then you're officially done from the college football playoff. But the Clemson and South Carolina thing, if we're going to have conversations about 3-loss teams getting into the college football playoff, and now that there's a bunch of SEC teams that have 3-loss teams, South Carolina needs to be put in that conversation. And I think by the end of it, if they beat Clemson this weekend and you stack up resume for resume, looking at 3-loss teams, like South Carolina is going to have a pretty good resume. I don't know that they'll jump a team like Alabama, but they'll at least be in the conversation in a way that they've never been in the college football playoff era. So that rivalry has a lot of juice. And if they beat Clemson, I mean, that pretty much, I guess Clemson could still get to the ACC championship, but any hope of them getting an at-large bid, if that wasn't already dead, is then 6 feet under. So that rivalry is actually the game I'm most looking forward to this weekend.
Do you give Southern Cal any chance against Notre Dame in L.A.?
God, I hope so. How funny would that? How funny would that be? We said so many good things about Notre Dame because their offense looks good, and then they turn around and lose to USC. Oh, that'd be perfect.
We'll see. That one coming up at 2:30 on CBS on Saturday. Denton, have a great Thanksgiving, man. We'll talk next week.
I appreciate it, man. Happy Thanksgiving.
He's Denton Day, college football overtime on Sirius XM, with us every single Monday on the Jim's Firearms Hotline. Lady Tigers get a win at the buzzer. We talked about that at the top of that segment there, but if you missed it, they were down the entire game and came back and hit a buzzer beater to win it and remain unbeaten on the season. They're down there in the Bahamas. We'll come back and close out a Monday edition of the Hunt Palmer Show next.
The Hunt Palmer Show.
Audio Video Security Solutions, avssla.com is the website. Nothing is more important than the security of your home and your family. And for us in the Palmer house, it was an easy decision. We went with Audio Video Security Solutions to make that happen. Mitchell Fisher came out to the house, assessed our situation. We talked through a budget, told him what we were looking for. They made it happen 2 days later. Came out, brought the cameras with him, installed those front door, back door, got the app all set up so we can activate and deactivate the burglar alarm remotely. We can monitor the front yard and backyard at all times on the app on our cell phone. I just saw that my inflatable, the big Grinch sign that's in the front yard, it blew over. So I'm going to have to deal with that when I get home. But I was able to see that on my app right there, thanks to the folks at Audio Video Security Solutions. It's got a burglar alarm attached to it, all the cameras as well. We don't pay any cloud storage fees or anything. It's been fantastic, and the customer service after the installation has been great as well. So if you want that security system put in at your home or at your office, call the folks at Audio Video Security Solutions or check them out online, avssla.com. Audio Video Security Solutions, avssla.com.
This is the Hunt Palmer Show, brought to you by Gulf Coast Office Products.
congratulations to Jesse Sanchez from Bell Rose. Jesse is the Week 13 winner in our 2024 College Football Pick'em Contest and wins a Hooters wing party for 10 people. Don't forget to make your picks for the final round by this Thursday at noon. Last week for this season-long contest, so make sure you don't forget. Weekly winners will receive the Hooters wing party. Or sorry, we already got the weekly winners, but the first place season-long champion, who will be crowned after next week, will receive a 75-inch 4K flat screen TV and soundbar, plus free Hooters wings for an entire year. It's the 2024 College Football Pick'em Contest presented by Hooters.
How would you grade that promo?
Well, probably a 3.
3 out of 10.
Sometimes I try to just like go off script a little bit, and sometimes it doesn't work. So it didn't work that time.
Speaking of someone who never ever makes a mistake on the air, that's pretty pitiful.
Yes, that's
I'm always
true.
just
You're
perfect.
always perfect.
Never get tongue-tied at all. And never slur any words, forget names. That kind of stuff just never goes on. Always a perfect delivery. You just basically, I'm Bob Costas. Basically.
Pretty much.
Yeah. Or not. All right, let's play some Take It or Leave It.
All right, first one here.
These names on the Feinbaum show are absurd. The last guy was named like Detour, and this
Swamp
is
Dog?
Swamp Dog from Waycross, Georgia.
Wow.
Who are these people? It's $2.50 on a
They're all
Monday.
just old. They're all just old retired
Go
men.
to work.
They're
Stop
all
calling
old-
the Feinbaum show under the name Swamp Dog.
They're all old retired men. That's what they do. They listen to Feinbaum and just like to yell at him. All right, first one here.
Swamp Dog.
Four-star linebacker Zach Weeks, younger brother of Witt and West, has reclassified to the class of 2025, and he's committed to LSU. The Weeks brothers, take it or leave it.
I'll take it. I guess this is probably some pretty concrete evidence that Whit Weeks is going to stay at LSU. There was certainly never a rumor he was going to leave, but like you always have to leave that possibility open with every player in every sport in college now because of the transfer portal. But when your brother commits and says he's going to come play with you, like I feel like it's pretty unlikely that you're going to jump ship at that point. So I think if I'm looking at players that I know will be on the team next year for LSU, I think I can go ahead and put Whit Weeks on there. West played a little bit more on Saturday. Got a little bit of run at linebacker. Greg Penn came off the field a little bit, and they played Devon Keys at linebacker as well. So they used a little bit more bodies at linebacker. I think the Weeks are some talented dudes, and so I'll take them.
All right, next one here. The Pelicans will more than likely get C.J. McCollum back. He is probable for their 6 o'clock tip in Indianapolis. They'll finally get a win. Take it or leave it.
Leave it. They still don't have half the guys.
Well, yes, that's true. They still are missing Zion. They're still missing Herb Jones. They're still missing DeJounte Murray.
Yeah.
That's not good.
No, it's not. That's most of the salary.
Yeah, it is.
Most of the salary cap there.
Yeah, and apparently Zion's out getting tattoos, and he's
saw
looking a little flabby.
Little pudgy?
Not exactly. Looks like he's
That is a big tattoo. Did you see the tattoo?
It is very large.
That is a lot of ink.
It's a lot.
Because you realize that it's his entire back, which is a lot of ink, and then you realize that he's like 6'8".
Yeah.
So that's just a lot of tattoo. What does that cost? I have no perspective on tattoo costs.
I think it's probably not cheap, considering he probably got like a pretty
Are we thinking this is like a $12,000 tattoo?
Oh, I don't know.
I have no idea. Is this a $3,100 tattoo? Like, I have no idea what the market is on tattoos these days.
I don't either, but I would guess that considering how large it is and that he probably got a pretty reputable artist to do it,
How long do you have to sit there while they etch your back?
It's a long time, for sure. It's a giant tattoo, so it probably took a while.
That just seems like a lot. But
yeah.
Hey, that's what you want to do? Get after it, Zion.
Yeah, I guess, but still not a great look, I guess. You know, you're not playing because you have a hamstring strain and you're out getting tattoos and looking a little bit out of shape in the process. So
what do you expect?
What do you expect?
That's what I expect.
Yeah, that's what we expect.
Now the caller on the Feinbaum show is Greg from Enterprise.
Nice.
So no more Swamp Dog. He must have hung up.
All right, last one here.
Swamp Dog.
Last one, Wicked the movie. As you said, you went and saw it.
I did go see it yesterday. I'll take it. It was fine. It was long. It's like 3 hours, but I got a couple of beverages, and we passed the time.
I've heard is it going to be a part one?
Oh, yeah, it's part one. Like the
wow.
last scene, they sing the song, and then like they haven't even gotten the credits up, and it goes like part 2 coming. Like
lovely.
They've already got that.
So 3 hours is part one.
Yeah, part one.
That's a lot.
It's a lot of singing.
It is a musical.
It is, and but I thought it was good. I enjoyed it. I know my wife enjoyed it a lot. I was impressed with the physical ability of the cast. I thought that the two leads, in terms of their choreography and the singing ability, and then like dancing while singing and all that kind of stuff, I thought it was really impressive stuff.
Wow, what a great review, Hon.
I'm basically Roger Ebert.
Yeah, I mean,
what's Siskel's first name?
Siskel and Ebert, Gene Siskel and
Gene
Roger
Siskel?
Ebert. Yeah,
Roger
Gene's
Ebert.
still kicking it. Roger, rest in peace. But yeah, that's a really.
Raj kicked the bucket?
Oh yeah, that's years ago.
Oh, well, I hate to hear that.
Really sad.
Who's
but,
reviewing movies now?
well, Gene Siskel still does it, I think.
What do you think about Heavyweights, the movie? That's really the question.
Yeah, really, that's a childhood favorite, but probably not going to be winning any kind of awards at any point.
Did Rotten Tomatoes do to Siskel and Ebert what like Netflix did to Blockbuster?
I don't know, but we have 3 seconds.
We got 3 seconds.
so.
See you tomorrow.
The Hunt Palmer Show.
Highland Insurance Group, HighlandIG.com is the website. Property and casualty or group employee benefits. Your one-stop shop for all things insurance is, of course, the Highland Insurance Group. If you're a business owner and you don't have a great relationship with your insurance broker, they're just the guy who came with the lowest premium number. That's one way to handle it, but it might not be the best way, especially when something happens. Whether it's a hurricane or a car accident or a cyber breach or a lawsuit or an injury. When that happens, you're going to need your insurance to respond. And if you only have the insurance in place because it was the cheapest one, it may not. Jonathan Carver and his team can be a trusted advisor and a part of your team as a business to make sure that your business continues to run even if the event happens. Give them a call or check them out online, HighlandIG.com. They're right here in Baton Rouge, but they can help you out statewide. It's Jonathan Carver and his team at the Highland Insurance Group. They're online at HighlandIG.com.